So I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Let me get our first question ready here. So this was a question posted over on Slack in our book club channel. So I'll go ahead and use that one first. From Rob Fraser. It was great to read the case study on CSG International in Chapter 7. Are there any other role model enterprises that have gone through transformations and are starting to take strides towards BVSSH best practice? Who wants to take that question?
John, I'm sure you'll have a lot. I referred to page 60 in the book immediately on the chat, just around Nationwide Building Society is one good example, good reference points. But I know there's others out there. I don't know if there's anyone else you want to particularly draw attention to.
Yeah, I think Nationwide's a good example. Two case studies in the book, thoroughly embracing the philosophy around focusing on outcomes, better, value, sooner, safer, happier. Jolt, who is currently called Jofia. You need to update your name, Jolt, in the Zoom. Jolt is currently at Nationwide. I don't know if you want to add anything, Jolt.
Definitely, thank you. So Jofia is my daughter, and this is the laptop, so she's using it for classes.
Looks like we can't hear you.
Oh, you can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
Can you hear me? Thank you. So for the names, my daughter's name, so she's using the same laptop for classes. So Nationwide is a brilliant example for focusing on outcomes, and there is a high alignment. They are going towards a high alignment between strategic objectives and team level work. There is lots of education session trainings on, for example, there is Flow One-on-One, which I've been running. So it's a focus and big enthusiasm around focusing on outcomes. So that's, yeah, it's a brilliant example. They are on the journey, and there are various pockets where it is embedded more and used more. But the whole language around experimentation, outcomes, leading and lagging indicators, it's all used, and we see the positive impact of doing so.
And also some other organizations who are not in the book who will remain anonymous, but in terms of, just to give you an idea of their industry sector, so a part of the government, working with the government, an energy company, and a retailer. So just to give you an example that it's not specific to an industry sector, it's very much around organized human endeavor, be that commercial, charity, government, it's people trying to achieve stuff.
Excellent. All right, we have a question over here in the chat, which I'll put up first. From Dean, hello. In getting a security team aligned to a value stream, do you have any examples of that happening without senior leadership support? It seems like a heavy organizational lift.
Well, the problem is, it depends on your current context, obviously, but in a traditional model, your security team will be in a separate silo from all of your different value streams and delivery areas. And so for one individual there to partner deeply with a particular functional area may not work for them. It does vary. It all depends on how that's managed, that interaction traditionally in your organization. So I have seen contexts where a security specialist is embedded within a large multi-year program team. Yep, I've seen that happen in the past without needing any particular new organizational construct. But more typically, what I see is projects that come and go, requiring help from their safety or security or compliance colleagues, needing something more continuous, more sustainable to work with, rather than a ticket-based, please work with me now type basis. So certainly in chapter 6 in the book around having that alignment, creating that alignment between your security and other safety functions and your value streams is incredibly helpful. It does require a level of senior support to do that, but actually not as much. It wasn't as disruptive as you might first think. When again, there's lots of different ways of doing this, but our pattern, the way we happened to do it at that time, was through virtual teams. So we didn't change the security organization. There was no, it still remained, there was 50 individuals working for a CISO, a head of security, engaging with colleagues in change. So they still existed, but the way their work was managed had changed. The way they were aligned and prioritized was changed. So that was, they still engaged with the risk areas, with the areas generating risk, generating development. But the way the work was farmed out, was packaged, the way they managed those relationships was different. So it wasn't a cost issue for the CISO, it wasn't a headcount issue for the CISO. It was purely an ethos and organizational set of decisions that were needed. So I've seen it work both ways.
I'd add to that, Miles, and obviously we had the same experience there. The one thing I would add is it's not just an organizational lift, and as Miles said, it isn't necessarily a big organizational lift, but the thing that is a big change is a cultural change. Traditional security areas are very, very used to saying, hey, give me your design of the thing that you're going to spend the next 6, 12, 18 months building, and I'll come back in a few weeks with some questions and let you know whether that's a good design or not. And moving that sort of culture to something where it really is about experimentation. We might change our mind. We might change this design in 2 weeks entirely based on a change of technology, a change of understanding, a change of customers' mind. Getting the security teams into that culture, that's the harder shift, and that only comes with time. It comes with working closely with understanding their concerns in working that way, and just talking to them and spending the time explaining that sort of shift in culture and shift in ways of working.
It's absolutely fair enough. So it does depend on where your leadership currently are setting that tone. I've seen some security colleagues who felt that the tone that they were in, their culture was they were not allowed to advise what to do, what secure solutions might look like. They were only allowed to mark the work that the development teams had done. They could tell you were wrong, they couldn't tell you what was right. And these individuals genuinely believed that segregation of duty required them to operate like that. So if that's your culture, then yeah, you're going that is an issue. How I've seen some of these things nudge is, I saw it very clearly on the cloud adoption, public cloud adoption initiative. And it for that, after a couple of years of pain, one of the ninja moves was to take the senior leadership team out to reinvent, and that included the CISO, and really get that team excited about the potential and understanding the opportunities for greater security through native cloud solutions, which they hadn't really quite taken on board until then. So there's a few different levels you can work out here.
Great. We have another question over in the Q&A, unless anyone else had anything to add to that. All right, from Ray. I see cases where business outcomes tied to value streams could overlap. How do you ensure that the nested outcome approach avoids siloed or duplicative efforts?
So a few thoughts on that. Thank you, Ray, for your question. The first thought is that it's important to have clear strategic alignment with your nested outcomes. So if you've got organizational wide multi-year strategic outcomes and you've got that lineage, so then your next level down value stream, for example, a business unit will have its own multi-year outcomes. And within that, the value stream have their outcomes. It's important to have that alignment, because if there's an alignment and there's a clear parentage, then you've got transparency and you can navigate that. So you can take a look at an outcome here, you can double click, and in the visualization, you can then see here are the outcomes that each of the value streams are working on to achieve this high level outcome. So first of all, I think it's important to have that alignment to strategic outcomes, because where there are orphaned outcomes with no parents, it's very, very difficult. It's much harder then to identify where there's overlap or duplication. It's much easier to identify any inadvertent overlap if there's a clear alignment. And in the past, we used to run a daily report which would highlight any orphaned outcomes at any level. That's thought number one. Thought number two is, at the beginning of this journey for traditional organizations, there will be a high degree of dependencies. And there will be a high degree of outcomes which are dependent upon each other, and maybe even needing some duplication. Because at the beginning of this journey, when there hasn't been a focus on decoupling, then you've got dependencies all over the place. It's like this spider's web of dependencies. The mistake that we've made in the past, that I've made in the past, is we were managing the dependencies, but we weren't breaking them. So a lesson learned there was, I realized after 1 year, it's like, oh, how stupid have we been? We've been putting all of this effort into visualizing the dependencies, but not breaking them. So then we pivoted to focusing on breaking the dependencies, which again means that the outcomes are less likely to overlap or be duplicative, because you've got high cohesion, low coupling, one job, do it well type approach. My third and final thought on this is communication and collaboration. So it is a good thing to do to either physically before the pandemic and after at some point in the future, virtually at the moment, to use a term, big room planning. I don't particularly like that term, but the behavior is a positive behavior, which is you're getting a bunch of people together and you're having a shared conversation, shared learning, shared awareness around these are the outcomes we're going after. People walk through it, so you can then spot duplication and you can spot if there's any overlap. So those are my three thoughts. I don't know if anyone has anything they want to add to that.
I'd say, if these are genuine outcomes, then for them to exist in N places in the organization shouldn't matter for the same one. If the outcome is to sell more mortgages and more mortgages are sold, then however many teams have had that in their work queue, it doesn't really matter. The outcome has been achieved if these are genuine outcomes. And we've got to remember they're not cost objects. It's not like you're paying this much money for this outcome. It refers to a goal, and the finances should be quite separate from all that.
Great, thanks guys. All right, one more question over here from Basilio. What's needed to learn in order to perform the right value stream architecture to evaluate an organization? What books do you recommend? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I'm just reflecting on the question, to perform the right value stream architecture. This is around value stream design as opposed to technical architecture design, I think.
Yeah.
That's what you read, Simon, as well, yeah.
That's what I read. I mean, for me, I would defer to Jolt here, because value stream mapping is the exercise you really, really want to be performing here.
Yeah, so value stream mapping is definitely, it's a great pattern for continuous improvement. So understanding end to end, understanding who's involved, and then having the representatives in the room from each of the different steps in the flow end to end, and to learn together, first of all, how it flows end to end, also how long it takes, whether we like it or not. If we like it, that it takes 2 years, then if we like it, we leave it there. But my experience is usually what happens is when we map it out, it's always an eye-opening. So I always ask the question whether there was anybody in the room who knew that actually these are the steps and these are the people and this is how we get end to end. and there is no hand never that anybody knew the entire end-to-end. So that's a great learning exercise, first of all. But then secondly, that you can turn the table around and ask whether we like it or not. And if you don't like it, how do we improve it? So how do we optimize for fast end-to-end flow value? And the team gonna come up with lots of ideas, which usually about increasing collaboration, shifting work left, and so on. So it's definitely have it continuous improvement. Also, in terms of the value stream, it's never gonna be perfect. It's gonna evolve. So if you wanna start and you think this is the long-lived value delivery stream that probably you dare to start with, and after that with continuous improvement practices and looking at what the dependencies are and whether we have a optimized value stream or not, that you can always evolve it.
And Joel, did you have any books to recommend around value stream mapping?
So I guess Sooner Safer Happier would be one I would definitely recommend. Also, they're good to project to product. So Mick Kirsten's book, which is another awesome IT rep book, talks about the flow framework, and then also provides lots of great measurements on how to actually monitor and see whether the end-to-end flow is improving or not improving.
And team topologies, obviously, as well.
Oh, yes.
Team topologies, definitely, yes.
And we have another question extending on the same subject from Eric. Extending the question around value stream architecture, what experiences have you seen in bringing the discipline and skills of business architecture to bear in answering that question?
So this is a super interesting one. What we have seen here, we take the Kanban approach to value streams typically, which is start with where you are. Don't try and design something ideal. I think John can talk about some anti-patterns he's seen here where people have tried to divide organizations against their delivery flow, but try and work with what the current delivery flows are. They may not exactly map to some sort of idealized business architecture. That's likely to be due to some of the sort of residual state of your technical architecture, the people's knowledge, but try and map those existing value streams. To the team topologies point, try and look at how teams are working with your technical architecture today, your enterprise architecture. It might not be optimal in terms of how you might want to divide into mortgages versus current accounts versus credit cards. If you want to deliver value there separately. But you're not going to reinvent your organization tomorrow. You're not going to get everybody employed into entirely different roles and expect them to deliver efficiently. So start with where you are, map your existing value streams, try and optimize them, look at a target, look at where you might want to be, look at how you might want to refactor your technical architecture to let people work independently. That's where team topologies comes in terms of refactoring to microservices maybe, or refactoring to big services, refactoring to things that can deliver value independently and optimize over time. But you're not going to do this sort of big bang business re-architecting and technical re-architecting. That simply isn't an efficient way of working. That will break.
And
I think Simon, sorry, John.
Add to that, I think it depends on your definition of business architecture. So thank you for the question, Eric. And what experiences have you seen in bringing the discipline and skills of business architecture to bear? What I've seen and experienced has not been positive. And what I mean by that is an old school definition of business architecture with business architects who historically have been divorced from the real flow of value and have been designing kind of business, doing kind of business process re-engineering or flow charts without having an appreciation of flow and the flow of value, and without having an appreciation of weight states, work weighting, flow efficiency, where my personal experience is business architects have been old school. And there's been this mismatch between a business architecture and the technical architecture and the data architecture. And so a key learning here is the business architecture, the technical architecture, and the data architecture all need to go together to enable the fast flow of safe value. So for me, my experience is it's a journey to bring any colleagues in a traditional organization who have business architects. Often it's a journey to help bring them on the journey around the focus on flow, which again, personally leads me back to value stream mapping, shining a light on the system of work. And as Jean said and Simon said, light bulbs are going off left, right, and center when people realize, oh my goodness, I never knew work was waiting in a queue for that long. One business unit where we did this at the business unit level, what we were able to shine a light on was that this business unit was saying yes to twice as much work as they could possibly produce. So every month, the backlog of stuff they were saying yes to was growing by a month. And they were unaware of that previously.
John, it looks like Eric has a follow-up over here in the chat. He says, to clarify my mindset behind the question, I've been exploring the use of the visualization and documentation aspects of the domain as a tool for starting where you are and understanding operational value streams and reuse, not looking at from the business process re-engineering point of view. In practice, finding a clean understanding of current reality is a challenge.
Yeah, that sounds, go on, Simon.
So what I was going to say was, it's really operational value streams versus delivery value streams is super interesting. And actually, they're really two different concepts that some methodologies try and smush together. They're actually different. Operational value streams, the way you deliver value to a customer, we typically call value chains rather than value streams, because what we're talking about optimizing is the delivery of value, and typically, not always, typically in a model organization that involves some kind of software delivery, at least somewhere down the chain. So that delivery value stream, who gets involved in delivering brand new outcomes, is quite different from that sort of operational value chain, where it's really all very customer focused, and obviously the outcomes need to be focused on the customer, but optimizing how you deliver is focused on optimizing that delivery value chain, not the operational value chain.
And yeah, and to add, Eric, to your clarification, I think it's yes and. So where I've seen that done not so well is where it's been documented in a manner which is more like flow charts, flow diagrams, and with silos, not from a mentality of flow and the flow of value and work being worked on and work waiting. So personally, what I have found to work is, in terms of understanding the current state, is to do value stream mapping on a giant physical or virtual wall with all of the people involved left to right, and it doesn't need to be completely perfect, it just needs to be just good enough. And pretty quickly you can get a good idea of very roughly how much time work is being worked on, how much time work is waiting, where the biggest bottlenecks are. That's my personal approach.
I think that's super important what John just said, because it's learning is always the biggest impediment. So especially if you introduce jargons and super scientific quantum mechanics around doing a value stream mapping, it's not going to serve the purpose of getting everybody together, learning together, and coming up with an improvement backlog, and so that you can see the impact.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, guys. This is a question that was posted over on Slack the other day, so I'm going to read that out. Do you have any pointers to running internal ways of working conferences? On page 338, you said it's a great way to share learning and raise the bar, but searching didn't provide anything that appears related.
Jokes? Internal ways of working conference.
Internal, yeah. So we had great experience with ways of working conferences. So we had at one large organization, we had like at each geographic we had annually and semi-annually conferences. So this is one big enabler of connecting teams, because usually what you see in organizations, that information and knowledge is in bubbles, and so teams don't know what other teams are actually doing, and because the information knowledge is not shared outside the team. So ways of working conferences and running awards and with ways of working conferences is definitely accelerate connecting those disconnected information and knowledge bubbles in the organizations.
And a learning for, if anyone on this call is interested in running your own ways of working internal event, a couple of learnings. Reflection number one, when we first started running them, we had mostly external speakers. About 2 years later, we had mostly internal speakers, which was a real testament to it was a testament to progress, but also it was a very positive, virtuous, reinforcing cycle of giving people recognition for the great stuff they'd done. And then it wasn't then about what other people had done, it was about what had been done in the organization. So shifting that balance to getting more internal speakers. Awards, running an award ceremony, unbelievably positive, generates so much goodwill, and you get all of the storytelling coming out of the woodwork. It's really hard to get the examples when you ask for them. Run an award ceremony, and all of a sudden you've got loads of great case studies. So awards, and also when you run the awards, another learning is they're team awards, they're not individual awards. So teams are incentivized, not individuals.
The value of conferences is we're trying to create. Sorry, Simon, go.
Sorry, go on, Miles. No, go.
I was just going to say we're trying to create social proof, aren't we, in the organisation by telling those stories, by having, whether it's ideally internal but also external, is just to reinforce those messages and help maybe the early majority get on board and start to be interested and curious. So they can be very powerful tools to mobilise large numbers of people.
Agree. And just the energy of participation I remember from those conferences. There's one particular example of the effort people made in to make their own presentation videos, like genuine sort of movie trailer quality videos about the story and the achievements they'd made. People took so much pride in just telling their story. And as John said, this is, as with all of these improvements, this isn't something that happens overnight. It's something that you start small, you build and you build, but that virtuous nature of social proof it's really heartening.
Thanks, guys. So I wanted to ask one of my own questions, going back to the book. We see a lot of organizations that focus on features, the feature factory, just give me more features, that's what the customers want. So how do you push back against a business that's just wanting more and more and more features? I feel that's pretty common.
I think it goes with, so BVSSH, it's a balancing measure. So the value is so important. So if we churn features, maybe we get lots of good sooner delivery with the features. But if we don't see that customers are actually subscribing to what we delivered, they are engaged, there are behavior patterns, changes happening because of that, that immediately see in those leading and lagging indicators in our value hypothesis, outcome hypothesis. So that feedback loop helps the leaders to realize that actually, yes, we are doing a lot of stuff, but there is no value, no benefit from the customer, no learning.
Yeah, in my experience, it is hard. The culture of just give me more features is built into many companies. multiple stakeholders have routes in to get their favorite new feature that they think is going to add value. It goes back to that sort of culture of certainty that we try and flip around to a culture of humility and a culture of learning. But it really is culturally embedded in so many organizations. Another great book on this, sorry that it's not an IT Rev one, is Melissa Perry's Escaping the Bill Trap. Sorry, Melissa Perry's Escaping the Bill Trap.
Yeah.
I'll type it in the chat. But it's such a broad culture that getting out of that just feature mentality is something that is it's across the industry, and it's only just the last few years being started to be acknowledged as something that really needs focus. And it is flipping to outcomes is really the ninja move here. People start genuinely to understand, oh, what do you mean we're not turning any important dials here? We're just building stuff. That light bulb moment is really the beginning of the value revolution. And then for me, once you understand it's not value at any cost, then the balancing factors of better, sooner, safer, and happier really build the rest of the story.
Great.
Yeah. That, just to emphasize that last bit, the State of DevOps report showed that mediocre performers were reducing their lead time, but the quality was going down and happiness was going down. So that's what happens, and you can by focusing on the outcomes, you can. That's how you see the fact that it's a feature factory, because quality is not improving or getting worse, and happiness is not improving or getting worse.
I think there's one of the ninja moves is around trying to break the pure customer supplier construct. So the area, if you have a delivery area of change and they are starting to ask for senior individuals from the business side, their customer side, to actually come and partner with them, then you and we've seen this, area of 1,000 people asking for 20 senior directors to come and be part of their organization, line management or not, doesn't matter, but be part of that group to figure out what matters, to figure out those outcomes, to figure out the priorities. And by starting to create a join between those two sides of the equation, you break down that customer supplier construct and get more mature outcome-based conversation.
Okay, great. Got a couple questions over in the Q&A. This one is from Mark. Are there any examples of any fintech regulators approving continuous compliance and the shift to what is being done right versus blame on audit exceptions?
The question is specifically around fintech or finance industry in general?
I think knowing markets, finance in general, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely, the continuous compliance conversation, we've certainly seen that pattern succeed at scale in the finance industry, and the patterns described in chapter 6 have been established across sort of 15,000 individuals in these sort of regulated high organizations. So yes, we have seen them work, and they absolutely do succeed. I think I probably need a bit more information about the question there if there's more to it. The regulators, we didn't actually. Yeah, sorry, John. Cool.
Sorry, Miles. What I can add, Mark, is I was fairly regularly having conversations with the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. The FCA I haven't been in touch with them for a while, but they were on their own journey around agile ways of working within the FCA. And we, at one point, with a bunch of organisations, we authored a white paper specifically for external regulators in the finance industry, but it applies across industry sectors around how better ways of working are less risky. And so I've only ever experienced support, Mark.
Great. Next question is from Phil. What are your additional thoughts on changing mindset from product manager to value outcome leader? Impact from expanding the role to include internal work, investment, and maintenance. I loved this mention in chapter 5 as we struggle with PMs that struggle to see value in internal work over prioritizing business customer value. Still a current core conflict between IT and business, even though PMs are part of our cross-discipline teams. And he follows that up to clarify that they do dedicate, at least they believe they do, 20% time for improvement time.
I would say on the latter one, Phil, if you believe you dedicate 20% to improvement time, do try and track it with some outcome metrics on improvement. On the first one, I would say this again, as I answered one of the questions earlier, it takes time. Fundamentally, if you are changing the culture to this sort of triumvirate that we talk about, the value outcome lead, the tech outcome lead or coach, and the team outcome lead and coach, and if that triumvirate see themselves as effectively together owning the balanced delivery of value, then the person who is leading on value starts to appreciate some of the challenges that the person is leading on tech has. If it's not just feature, 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 or if it's not just value delivery, value delivery, value delivery, that sort of cleaning up technical debt or building technical improvement time into the work schedule. Again, these people work together over time. They learn that the product outcome lead or the value outcome lead learns that if you don't clean up tech debt, your delivery goes slower. But that takes time to understand. They're not going to get that straight away without being deep in the team and without sort of conversation and team building. So my main answer here is sort of time and collaboration, apart from anything.
And to add visualization, the use of colors is quite good here. So if you visualize the type of work over a period of time, it could be weekly or monthly, new features, failure demand, continuous improvement, and risk stories, 4 types of work. And you can have a conversation with the person who's going from being a product manager to a value outcome leader. And you can say, look, it's all blue. It's all feature, feature, feature. And then now, oh, look, now it's all failure demand. Now we've got a whole bunch of quality issues. And you know what? Now we're not balancing continuous improvement. I prefer the term continuous improvement to tech debt, by the way.
Yeah, we have had that conversation with Mick.
Yeah, it's not just about paying off past debt. There's cultural debt, there's tech debt, there's process debt. It's all continuous improvement. So I wouldn't wait until debt has been incurred before improving, because some of it might be getting more into the black before you've incurred some red, if you know what I mean. So I think color visualizing it is I have found to be an effective way to do it as well for people on the journey.
That again is a reference to the flow framework in project to product.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the key themes here is about time incentive as well. If the project manager, as you've described here, or the product manager, if they have a short-term horizon, if they are incentivized based on short-term goals, then that you will struggle to change those compared to a longer-term incentive to accelerate. If this individual is thinking over a 2 to 3 year horizon about how to improve performance, they're far more invested in that platform and making that platform fly than otherwise.
Absolutely, we use the word stewardship a lot there. If you're going to be that sort of long-term steward of the product, rather than, hey, I've got a deadline to hit in 12 months, then I'm off to my next project, that balance becomes much easier.
Are there any, this is an anonymous question. Are there any thoughts from the authors on the PMI development to move toward agile principles and namely disciplined agile framework?
Lots of thoughts.
We have thoughts. We do have thoughts. Yes.
Do you want to share those thoughts?
The diplomatic ones go, well, actually, at our previous organization where we all worked together, we were super impressed by the pragmatism of the disciplined agile framework. When we started down our, what we have talked many times about was our initially big A, big T agile transformation journey, which turned into a ways of working initiative. When we started down that route, we discussed with our agile community of practice, should we pick up a framework? Should we be inspired by any frameworks? And we looked at then large scale Scrum, we looked at SAFe, there were some serious voices advocating for SAFe. But actually the one that we were majorly inspired by was Disciplined Agile, just because of its context sensitivity, its ability to pick practices based on what you're comfortable with, what fits best to you, rather than here's the book, go follow this. So in terms of Disciplined Agile, just outside the context of PMI, Scott and Mark's work is actually genuinely, hugely inspiring. PMI, it's an interesting marriage, is all I will say on that one.
And I think if I can echo Simon's comments, the great thing in our previous experience around Disciplined Agile, as Simon said, it was a bit of a ninja move, because for some traditionally minded people who wanted to be following a recipe, it was like, yeah, okay, yeah, here's the book. But actually it's a ninja move because context counts, pragmatism, and actually, you know, it doesn't mandate anything, and it's not about prescriptive practices. So perfect. That's perfect in terms of a philosophical fit of doing what's optimal in context. And I think that it's perhaps not surprising for PMI to want to build out their agile competence with a recognition of this is how the world is. This is the way. This is, you know, the age of digital, and this is the future. And so I think PMI, I think there's a learning journey there as well. I think there's a risk of water scrum fall, which we see quite often. It's still a deterministic mindset, but with the word sprint 10 times in the middle of the Gantt chart. So I think there's a journey to go on there, and it's good that PMI are embracing more modern ways of working, and long may that continue. And I think the PMI actually need to rename themselves from the Project Management Institute to something else.
To the Value Management Institute. Yes,
the Value Outcome Institute. Yes.
Yeah.
Value Outcome Coaching Institute. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, I think we've got one more question. I think we just have enough time to answer it. This is from Mark. Is there any particular implementation order that you'd recommend for a ways of working transformation? Or should each company tailor to suit what they think is important?
The one thing I would,
Go on.
sorry, the quick one for me there is do have a read of Dan North's Scaling Without a Religious Methodology. Dan's order is visualize, stabilize, optimize, and then rinse and repeat. And I think that's a good philosophy in terms of a very basic ordering.
And what I would suggest is do have a read of Sooner, Safer, Happier, chapter 9, which is how to get started, Mark. So there are some steps laid out in chapter 9, suggested, obviously context counts, your organization is unique, it's there as guidance, there's no one size fits all. But as per chapter 9, there's got to be a clear why for an organization. You'll be surprised, or maybe you won't be surprised, how often I ask why to a leadership team, and there's no common answer. People can come up with a why, but there's no shared agreement. Start with the why, focus on the outcomes, leaders go first, create a ways of working center of enablement. You've got to have people whose full-time job it is to help improve the system of work. Start small, create an S-curve, nail it before you scale it. Think big, start small, learn fast. Invite over inflict. Involve everyone, top to bottom, not grassroots, not just the top. have a bias to action. Don't spend a year in PowerPoint, as some organizations have done, and become a continuously relearning organization.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank the authors so much for joining us today, and to all of the viewers who've joined in and asked such wonderful questions. I think that's about it for today. We'll be back with these authors once more this Friday at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, I believe. I'll post in the Slack the exact time and the link and everything there. And on Friday, we'll also have a guest, special guest. Gene Kim is going to come and ask these authors a few questions of his own. So I think you'll want to come and join us for that. I want to thank everyone one last time, and everyone have a great week.